Good morning and welcome to Harrington Starr's next edition of FinTech Focus. I'm James Hounsell and I'm delighted to be joined by FeedStock's Managing Director, Lucas Wurfbain. Good morning.
Hi James, very good to be here.
Probably the best place to start is for you to tell us a little bit about who FeedStock are and the market that you're in.
FeedStock was started just under 3 years ago by myself and Charlie Henderson, my co-founder. FeedStock is an integrated software solution that serves as the buy side of the fund management world. So what we essentially do is we cater to a couple of different use cases. Yep. The primary one that's really in focus at the moment is MiFID II. It's the compliance use case. So what we do is we integrate into the systems of the buy side to be able to track all their research consumption. And we do this for a couple of reasons. So obviously the compliance reason, to make sure that these companies are MiFID compliant, to show to the regulator, to their underlying investors, to any of the stakeholders, that they're tracking their research consumption and they can justify the payments to the research providers accurately. And the second use case is productivity. In doing this and in creating this qualitative and quantitative data trail of research consumption, if you were to do that normally, it'd be an incredibly time-consuming activity. And that's why we integrate into these systems and we can do all of this tracking, both the quantity of it and the quality of it automatically without interfering with the analyst or the fund manager's day-to-day operations. And then the last real sort of dominant use case for this is budget. And obviously, research has to be paid for now. It has to be paid for separately. Some firms are choosing to pay for that themselves, and others are still passing that on to their underlying investors. But for those who pay for it themselves, this becomes a budgeting exercise. They need to know whether the research that they're paying for is actually being used, and if it's being used, is there actually value being derived from that? So, it's a brand new use case, new problem, and we're a new solution for that.
Excellent. So would you say this was an example of regulation being a catalyst for the change?
I think it is to a degree. What we're seeing is certainly the MiFID II regulation coming through now here in Europe is part of a much bigger driver, and that's the driver towards greater transparency. And this really puts these things into focus for funds. The need to have greater reporting to their underlying investors, to the regulators, etc. But in doing so, what we didn't want to do is to create a solution that just solved a compliance problem. Obviously it's good to tick that box, and we definitely do that with the system that we have in place. But what we find important is to be able to make that a positive catalyst for productivity going down the line. So, and how we do that is the data that we capture, as I mentioned before, helps people to understand the value of the research that they use, and hence it's a budgeting exercise, and it obviously gives them an insight into whether they're paying too much or too little, and can definitely save them hundreds of thousands, potentially even the millions of pounds on the research that they consume. But it also, very importantly, in collecting the data of certainly the qualitative data of research being consumed, we're collecting a huge amount of very high quality, high frequency data points, which also helps the firm to understand their own processes. Yeah. And so we're looking at transparency certainly towards the outside world and funds being clearer about what they do and to their stakeholders, but certainly also increasing the internal transparency and understanding how teams work, what is the most productive way to spend their time, what is the most efficient way to ingest research, to use research, etc. So that's really for us. We see certainly the regulation as the stick, but I think there, for these firms to put new processes in place to really harness data is for us a very important thing.
Excellent. Compliance has been the top of many organisations' lists of things to do for many reasons. Pushing that to one side, with the environment that we're in, where getting companies to spend money is difficult, how do you justify the ROI of your product away from compliance?
It's a very good question. Obviously, compliance is an important driver, and that for many firms is a binary. You have to be compliant. If not, obviously, there's a huge associated cost of non-compliance with that. But coming back to the point I raised earlier, is what do we add to this product above and beyond compliance? And for us, that's really the most important point. And certainly, the ROI is justified from the budgeting perspective. We give a much clearer analysis of where value is actually being derived from research products, and for firms that spend 2, 3, 4, 5 million a year on research, being able to shave 10-20% off that and making that a much more precise number is a fairly meaningful change. And certainly when you look at the cost of our software compared to what they can be saving there, that has a huge ROI already. But on top of that, it's also the productivity element and being able to generate these high quality data points to help firms understand how they work better. And that that in itself being displayed in our user interface is an immediate sort of win for the firm. They can understand, is there a clear correlation between how many meetings a team has done and how their performance is, or is a team that are doing fewer meetings and reading more PDFs in the office, are they doing better themselves? And they can sort of structure these processes, how people work, and understand that. And I think that use case is very relevant for the fund management industry, but certainly there is a huge amount of additional and incremental use cases beyond fund management, and that's for us also a very interesting future trajectory.
Excellent. It's scary that we're already in February of 2018 so far, but how do you see 2018 panning out for you guys?
Well, it's looking like a very, very exciting year. Obviously, we have the continued driver of MiFID and the compliance need for the buy side, and we're seeing a lot of very attractive growth there. It's certainly within the MiFID regions as well, but what's also very interesting is that outside of that, in regions that are not necessarily impacted by MiFID, we're seeing this sort of sweeping drive towards transparency, being very important for most firms, and that's creating a lot of demand for our product. But I think beyond that as well, on the other side of the equation, the sell side, they have a lot of processes, a lot of ways of, they're obviously the producers of the research and the sellers of the research, and they themselves also need to understand, how productive they are in producing that. What is their ROI of the research being produced? And our technology, which sits at the core of these solutions, is an integrated solution that automatically is able to extract usage information, qualitative and quantitative, applies just as well to the sell side as it does to the buy side. So we're now starting to speak to a number of firms there to really understand how what their use case is, and to be able to make those processes better. And I think one thing that a lot of firms use is a CRM, and what we find with the huge amount of firms is that populating a CRM is a pretty painful process. It in large amounts of it is a very manual thing. Every meeting you have, you type up your notes, and so our system is built to be able to populate that automatically. So that's a very interesting road that we're going down, and we hope to see a lot of we hope to give you a lot of news on that in the not too distant future. Excellent,
fantastic. Well, Lucas, thank you very much for your time coming in and talking to us today. Really appreciate it. Guys, that's the end of our FinTech Focus episode. I'm James Hounslow, and we look forward to joining you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, James.